Hi, I'm Bill Snodgrass, and welcome to this episode. In this episode, I want to answer the question. I get asked this a lot by young photographers. They ask me, "What lens should I use?" And I'm gonna answer that question with what I call the Bigfoot Principle. The Bigfoot Principle. I am coming to you live from the center of the polar vortex 2019. I don't know if it's really the center, but it's really cold. It's like negative 27 or something, and negative wind chill of negative ridiculous. Just if those of you who are wondering if it's Celsius or Fahrenheit, at negative 40 it's the same. I think it's negative 40. I'll have to check all this out. I will fact check all this. What lens should I use? Here's the Bigfoot Principle. This is the Bigfoot Principle. You're going to remember this. The lens that you should use, ask this question. If you were standing on the 75th floor of a high-rise elevator, high-rise building with a elevator, what did I say? If you're standing at the elevator door on the 75th floor of a very tall building and the doors opened and Bigfoot was standing there, what lens would you use? Bigfoot, the guy, the legendary creature that roams in the woods and stuff. What lens would you use? You'd use the ones you've got. If you're standing there with your iPhone, you'd use that lens. If you had your 200 millimeter telephoto lens, you would use that one. You would use the lens that you have. The bigger question is, what lens do you have? And if you have more than one lens, which of those should you use? You should use, don't miss the shot. Don't miss the shot. The idea of photography is to capture moments. You can only capture moments if you're ready to capture the moment. If you have your camera out, if you have your phone out, don't let the moment pass. If the door's open and Bigfoot's standing there and you're not ready to take the picture, you're gonna miss it. So the first question is, what lens do you have? With that said, I'm gonna talk about five aspects of lenses that you need to think about as you're considering upgrading, buying a new lens. 5 things that you should consider, and what do those things mean to you? First up is autofocus and image stabilization. I'm saying those together because most lenses have 2 little switches on the side. One is for autofocus and one is for image stabilization. What does that do? Autofocus, obviously, if it's in the MF, manual focus, the camera doesn't focus it, you have to focus it yourself. If it is in autofocus, the computer and the camera and the sensors and all that, whatever focusing system you have, will take over and will focus it. Image stabilization is a feature that the physics on it is pretty interesting. I've read a few articles. I don't think they're all exactly the same, but at the bottom of the day, there's accelerometers and spinning lenses and things so that as the lens moves, as the whole lens moves, that one lens will kind of counter move or not move in order to keep the image stable on the sensors. Image stabilization is awesome under a couple circumstances. Almost necessary in very, very low light. If you're trying to do some handheld shots of street lights or some things like that, street photography, and your shutter speed is down low, especially if you're using a telephoto lens, image stabilization is gonna work with the camera and take out some of those vibrations that are introduced. It's called camera blur, as opposed to if your camera's stationary and objects moving, that's called motion blur. So image stabilization is awesome. In sports photography, you're trying to freeze that action, and you're shooting on a telephoto lens, and you're shooting, and you want your handheld, but you're following the action. That image stabilization will add just a little bit of sharpness to it. So image stabilization is a great feature. I use it on all my sports photography. This is one of my portrait lenses, a 50 millimeter f1.4. We'll talk about f-stop next. It does not have image stabilization, but in portrait photography that's not as big a deal because I'm being very steady and I'm using a decent shutter speed, and the models are usually not jumping around. Sometimes they do want to jump around, and I'll have to deal with that. F-stop is how open is the lens. This is a great feature for creating that blurry background. Here's an example picture off my Instagram. Here's an example picture of that blurry background. Some people will call this bokeh, and some people will pronounce it differently. And I say bokeh because that's what I think I first heard it called, bokeh. It is that the sharp image in the foreground and then the background is blurred out, and even the lights will take on sort of a blurry effect. better lenses, that blurry background light effect will be more round and less polygonal, depends on how many fans they have in the aperture. So f-stop, the lower the number means the bigger the lens is open, and with the lens open wider, the depth of field becomes narrower, but you can raise the shutter speed. So if you're trying to do those street shots at night, a small aperture like 1.4 or 1.8 or 2.2, those low numbers mean large f-stop, and that's going to allow you to get more light to the sensor, meaning you can open and close that shutter faster. Focal length is another feature, and they're usually, as far as I know, they're always in millimeters. I haven't, in all my years since the 70s, I've never heard them mentioned any other way. At least I don't recall that. Maybe on telescopes they have a different rating system, but for camera lenses, 50 millimeter, 85 millimeter, 10 millimeter, 18, whatever, 200, 300. So the millimeter length, this is the focal distance, and that's the bigger the focal distance, the more telephoto it is. Now, interesting thing in photography to me is that we have the term telephoto means that we are narrowing the field of view. But then on the other side, we don't have like untelephoto, we call it wide angle. So it's like wide angle and telephoto. I don't know why it's not wide angle and narrow angle. It could be. And in fact, geometrically, the longer the lens, the higher the focal length, the narrower the field of view, the narrower that's going to pull in. So you're going to get a smaller section of what's in front of you. You're able to isolate in on not the whole team, but the one player, or not the whole farm, but the barn. So telephoto is in focal length. The bigger the focal length, the bigger the image is going to appear in the final frame. The bigger the subject is going, the image is going to be the same size. The bigger the subject is going to appear in the final frame. So focal length, 300 millimeter, big telephoto, 10 millimeter, big wide angle. That's pretty much the main features that people are going to usually talk about when they talk about lenses. F-stop and focal length, and then is it autofocus? Does it have image stabilization? Two more. This next concept, this is a feature that is really going to factor in if you do videography, and that is the focusing mechanism. Canon has a series of lenses they're called STM lenses, and they will focus silently. And so if the focus changes, I hope that focused, I don't know. If the focus changes, you don't hear it in the video. This lens does not have STM, and when this lens focuses, the video will pick up click 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 as it is ratcheting through. So STM is a step motor focusing STM. It is a focus mode that Canon has. I'm sure Nikon, I'm sure the Sonys, the other guys, I'm sure they all have a silent focusing. If you're planning on using your lens for videography, you will want to make sure your lens will focus silently. And also, this is where the wide angle lens is, especially if you're watching this video, you're probably didn't jump in and buy a full frame camera right out of the box. So you probably have a crop sensor lens. So those really small focal lengths, like 10 millimeters, 18 millimeters, those are going to be very handy if you're trying to do, vlog style. Look how big my hand is. That's a feature of, that's how they did Lord of the Rings. That's how Frodo and Gandalf are in the same scene. This is Gandalf and this is Frodo. Look how big Gandalf's hand is. Frodo's hand, Gandalf's hand. What are we talking about? Silent focusing. You need that. You need that if you're doing video. Really huge hand. Oh, look how small these hands are, so big. What they come to? Oh, magic. It's going to be that kind of a day, I can see. My head is going to be spinning like this all day long. Last thing, I've never really seen this talked about as a feature in lenses. However, happens almost like once a week with the Kids in Photography Club, and that is minimum focal distance. So girl had her was a 75-300 telephoto lens on, and her friend was over here, and then she's like whipped it around, and her friend was like 3 feet away. She's like, this lens is garbage, it won't focus. because you're too close. There's a minimum focal length, and interestingly enough, this lens doesn't have it stamped on the side. Most lenses will have focal length stamped on the side. I will show you that in some B-roll. There it is. So that's what it looks like. These numbers tell you the minimum focal length of the lens. So that's it. 5 things you need to think about when you are deciding what lens not to use. Use the one you got, but what lens should you buy? Is it autofocus? Does it have image stabilization? What are you going to use it for? Do you need those features? Pretty much you want autofocus. Do you need image stabilization? If you're going to do some low light stuff or you're going to do some sports, I would highly recommend it. F-stop. The smaller the number, 1.4, opens up and lets in more light than f/22. I made a video on f-stop. It's up here. Take a look at that. If you want more information on f-stop focal length, how much, the bigger the number, the narrower the field of view. The subject will fill more of the frame if it has a wide telephoto. And then the wide angle, 10, 18, 28, depends on where you want to cut it off. 35, some people might consider that medium range, sort of in that 35, 50, 85 is that medium range. Silent focus if you're doing video. And finally, what is the minimum focal length? Keep that in mind. If you can't get the thing in focus, you probably are too close. You're probably too close. There's one other thing I forgot to mention. I brought all my props over. There's this thing on the end of the lens, and it'll tell you what size filters to get. And if you can also get a set of step down rings so that you can use big old filters on smaller ring sizes. There's that. I have one last thought on that focusing up close thing. On the close focusing thing. If you can't get close enough with your kit lens, get your iPhone out. These things will focus in really. If you're doing like jewelry pictures and you're trying to get like really in on the diamond or whatever you have, and you can use your iPhone. Great camera, and these lenses will focus really, really closely. The challenge of doing that is make sure you don't block the light with the phone and have a big shadow of your phone. So that's it. If you have to get really, really close. That's all I had to say. All right, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Please share this video with someone else who may be considering buying a lens and they don't know anything what to do. Share this lens. Share this lens. No, you don't share this lens. That's my lens. Share this video. That you can share. Share the video with someone else. Leave me a comment, question, suggestion. Sign up for notifications. Subscribe to the channel. I think I covered it all. See you in the next episode. I did the head nod 2 days in a row. Must be this chair. I heard about this on somewhere. Sit on your shirt. There's your tip for free.